Greetings, Earthlings. Adam Savage here in my cave, and I am answering some Mythbuster questions from tested patrons. And today's question comes from Carl Bueller. Carl says, I like this question. Carl says, as a dive master, I've felt a feeling of what it's like to be near the point of drowning, and it's absolutely terrifying. You've talked about how scary the upside-down underwater car was, and we know about Jamie's fear of heights. But was there anything else that you did that may not necessarily seem dangerous or scary, but was? Almost everything. There's a lot in this question. There's a lot in this subject. And approaching things from a safety-minded standpoint really changed so much about the ways in which Jamie and I thought through, and Carrie, Tori, and Grant, thought through the execution of these methodologies. But your question was there stuff that was scary that didn't seem scary or dangerous, but was? Throughout the course of Mythbusters, we had a few close calls. We've talked about many of them. Some of them we don't talk about. Nobody ever came close to dying. But we had some close calls. We've had parts of explosions go over our heads. That was way back in the beginning days. But those close calls all served to do a couple of things. One, every single time we had one, we rejiggered every safety procedure until we felt confident in our safety margin. This is the thing. You're never going to be able to make something safe. You can increase the margin of safety. And as long as you're holding to that, and you don't suffer the illusion that you have made something safe, then you stay in that mental state that allows you to deal with the contingencies, because they're going to happen. The one thing that I left Mythbusters with more respect for than I started, the one thing that I found at the end of the run scarier than any other thing, flammable gases. Yeah, flammable gases are so scary. They can shift the margin of safety instantaneously. I was watching a movie the other day in which a character wanted to set something on fire. So they took a thing of gasoline and they poured it on it while they were given a speech. And then they talked about it, and then they talked about it, and they talked about it, and then they took a lighter and they went and they lit this thing on fire. That seemed like a reasonable scene to the screenwriter. And so they hired a pyrotechnician to do it. And I hope the pyrotechnician told them what the reality was, because the reality with gasoline is if you have a big pile of wood and kindling and you pour gasoline all over it, and then you wait before setting it on fire, what's going to happen is that gasoline shifts from a liquid to a gas. It starts sublimating quickly. And that gasoline gas is the most flammable gas it's literally flammable gas. It is. One of the worst injuries I got on Mythbusters was lighting a fire. And it wasn't a bad injury. It was this 3rd-degree burn on the back of my hand that was just about half an inch. It was a 2nd-degree burn on the back of my hand. It was about an inch. But the way it happened was I poured gasoline inside a car. I put on a proximity suit, an aluminized fire suit, and I went to light it, but I wasn't wearing a glove with the hand that I was lighting it with. And the fireball came out, enveloped me, and the only part of me that wasn't covered was this hand, because I had taken off the glove to light the lighter. I felt so stupid watching. I was so mad at myself watching the footage of that explosion. But here's the other thing about flammable gases. many of them, like propane. So let me just state, you don't ever want to use gasoline to accelerate your bonfire. It won't, it's not that it's gonna, I didn't finish this. When you light it and wait and talk and blah, 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 and then go to light it, what's gonna happen is the second you light that lighter, all of those gasoline fumes that have been like occurring, all that gas that is sublimated out of its liquid state into a gaseous state goes boom. And you can find endless YouTube videos of this happening. It's terrifying how fast it can move. And the other aspect of flammable gases is many of them that we use, like propane, are heavier than air, which means that when you have a leak, it settles on the ground. And if it's in your house, then the ground just becomes this literal like pool of gas. Yeah. No, are you getting as terrified as I am just describing that? This is horrifying. This is why gas explosions tend to level buildings. So it's not like there was some hidden danger out there that we uncovered on the show, which I think is sort of what your question was implying, Carl. But it's more like we learned that things could go sour at any moment. Okay, I'm going to walk you through our safety procedure, one of our safety procedures. So we would have a story meeting. We would talk about a myth like, okay, we're going to take Homer and we're going to build a Homer Simpson. We're going to fill him with water until he weighs as much as a real life Homer Simpson would weigh. We're going to suspend him from a crane and we're going to make a 5,000 pound wrecking ball in a house and we're going to smack them into each other. Okay, that's the narrative. We're going to find out if Homer could have protected his home from the wrecking ball. This is a story we did. Once we outline it on the whiteboard, it's how I think in terms of plot. I have to write it in front of me in longhand. Once we have the outline with the set of experiments, wrecking ball build, Jamie does that, Homer build, I do that, how it looks, where these things go, what location we're going to do it at, the build, etc. But then our insurance company wants to know how we're going to keep everybody safe. So they have questions like, when you do the experiment, what is the exclusion zone? How far is everyone going to be from it? How close do people need to be? And what are the precautions that we have for them? And we walk through all of those parameters for every single story, for every single location shoot. And on the insurance form, there was this wonderful guide that was like, well, how dangerous is this shoot? So there was always this like, this chart that was like what you're going to do and how dangerous it is and what's the likelihood that someone could die. And we were always in the black zone of like someone could die if something went wrong. We were always in that black zone. So you've actually asked, was there anything else you did that may not seem dangerous but was? And I mean, my answer is everything we did had giant amounts of hidden dangers in it. Which is, I can't speak to the partnership between Carrie, Tori, and Grant and how those guys operated because I wasn't privy to their on-the-ground safety discussions, but I'll assume that they went very similarly to the way they went with Jamie and I, which was we were constantly cross-checking each other. And that was the most powerful tool we had at our disposal, was someone's always checking your work. Someone's always going to challenge you on your work. And that's a pain in the ass, and it's the best thing in the world. When I went into productions for Savage Builds, the most recent show I did with Discovery Channel, we got the production offices set up. We started outlining stories, and I went into my office and I outlined my first story. And I think it was Iron Man, the Iron Man suit build. And I outlined it. And it felt really good. I hadn't done that in a long time. I hadn't outlined, I hadn't broken a story for a year or so, since Mythbusters Jr. And then I looked at it and I was like, what's wrong? Something's wrong. I'm looking at my outline and I'm like, what is wrong? And I realized what was wrong was I wanted Jamie to show up and challenge me on the construction, on the methodology. That was one of the most powerful creative tools I had building the narratives for the show, was having to justify and argue with Jamie over all the points. That was so I sat there for a day looking at my outline, coming up with Jamie with Jamie responses, and then having a kind of an argument with him in my head. That was a useful way in which I ran through the safety checks on Savage builds. I mean, this room is full of things that could harm me. I am cognizant of that at every moment. At the same time, I still get injured all the time. I'm using blades, I'm using spinning things, I'm using machines. I'm frequently using them for purposes they weren't intended, although less so now that I'm no longer doing Mythbusters. But for me, the hidden answer I have to your question, was there anything that didn't seem dangerous but was? My answer is, I learned on the show that when something doesn't seem dangerous, it's when you should be paying more attention. Yeah. Because it can go sour in a heartbeat, and you better be ready for how it could go sour. Yeah. I hope that was something of an answer to your question. I know you were looking for a specific kind of nugget, but I used it as a handle to talk about safety in general because it was such a vital and important and key piece of the production that we did. Thank you, Carl, for a terrific question. Like I said, I hope I answered it. If you end up with a more specific one, submit it and I will endeavor to answer it again. Thank you, tested patrons, for these awesome questions. Thanks, everybody else. I'll see you next time. Stay safe.